Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he pushed his cleaning cart down the pristine corridors of the Galactic Justice Station. The massive space station orbited the neutral zone between 12 different alien civilizations, serving as the ultimate court for interstellar disputes. To most beings in the galaxy, this place represented the pinnacle of advanced justice and technology. To Marcus, it was just another workplace where someone had to clean up the mess. He had been working here for 3 years now, ever since the Terran Federation finally gained membership in the Galactic Council. Humans were still considered a primitive species by most standards, barely advanced enough to be trusted with basic maintenance jobs. While other species operated quantum computers and managed dimensional courts, humans swept floors and emptied trash bins. Marcus didn't mind much. The pay was decent, and he got to see parts of the galaxy most humans would never experience. Plus, the aliens largely ignored him, which meant he could work in peace while listening to old Earth music on his headphones. Today felt different, though. There was unusual activity in the High Court chambers. Security drones buzzed around more frequently, and several species of diplomats he had never seen before were gathering in the main hall. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see massive warships from different civilizations hovering in space around the station. As he mopped the floor outside Courtroom Alpha, Marcus overheard fragments of conversation from the various alien officials, something about a territorial dispute that could trigger the first galactic war in over 1,000 years. The Zephyrian Empire and the Crystalline Collective were apparently on the verge of destroying each other over mining rights to a system rich in quantum crystals. The door to the courtroom slid open, and Marcus quickly moved his cart aside as a group of tall insectoid beings marched out. These were Zephyrians, and their chittering language sounded agitated. Behind them came the crystalline beings, their translucent blue bodies shimmering with internal light that pulsed angry red patterns. Marcus had seen enough alien emotions during his time here to recognize barely contained rage when he saw it. These two species were ready to tear each other apart. And apparently the only thing preventing galactic war was whatever decision the AI judge was about to make. The AI judge. Marcus had heard about it, but never seen it in action. It was supposedly the most advanced artificial intelligence in the galaxy, created by combining the best technology from all member species. The AI judge was completely impartial, incorruptible, and capable of processing legal precedents from thousands of different civilizations simultaneously. Its decisions were considered final and binding throughout the galaxy. As Marcus continued cleaning, he noticed more and more representatives arriving. Each species brought their own distinctive energy to the station. The cat-like Felinians padded silently through the halls, their large eyes constantly scanning for threats. The aquatic depths wore mechanical suits that allowed them to breathe and move in the station's atmosphere, water occasionally dripping from their gill slits. Even the energy-based Luminari had sent representatives, their forms contained within special crystalline matrices that allowed them to interact with physical matter. All of these advanced civilizations, with their incredible technology and ancient wisdom, were depending on the AI judge to prevent a war that could tear the galaxy apart. And Marcus was just the human janitor who made sure their floors were clean while they decided the fate of billions of lives. He finished mopping the corridor and was about to move to the next section when an emergency alarm began blaring. Throughout the station, red warning lights bathed the corridors, and an automated voice announced in the galactic common tongue that all non-essential personnel should report to emergency stations. Marcus looked around, unsure what to do. Technically, he was non-essential personnel, but he had never been told where the emergency stations were. The various alien officials were moving with purpose toward the courtroom, their conversations becoming more urgent and heated. Through the chaos, Marcus heard something that made him stop in his tracks. One of the Zephyrian officials was speaking into a communication device, and while Marcus didn't understand the alien language, he caught one phrase that was spoken in Galactic Common: AI judge malfunction. The most advanced artificial intelligence in the galaxy, the one machine trusted to prevent galactic war, was apparently broken, and judging by the panic in the voices around him, no one seemed to know how to fix it. Marcus looked down at his cleaning cart, then at the various alien species rushing around in barely controlled panic. He thought about his 3 years of working in this place, observing these incredible beings and their amazing technology. He had always felt like an outsider, a primitive human in a galaxy of advanced civilizations. But Marcus had one advantage that none of these brilliant aliens seemed to possess in this moment. He was calm. While they panicked about their broken AI judge, he was thinking about the problem like a janitor thinks about any broken machine. Sometimes the solution wasn't about advanced programming or quantum mechanics. Sometimes you just needed to turn something off and turn it back on again. He took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. Instead of reporting to an emergency station he couldn't find anyway, Marcus pushed his cart toward the courtroom. If the galaxy's most important computer was broken, maybe it needed the one thing none of these advanced species had thought to try. Maybe it needed a human touch. The courtroom was in complete chaos when Marcus wheeled his cart through the main entrance. Representatives from dozens of species were shouting in their native languages, while universal translators struggled to keep up with the overlapping conversations. At the center of the massive circular chamber stood the AI judge, and Marcus got his first good look at the machine that was supposed to save the galaxy. It was both more and less impressive than he had imagined. The AI judge appeared as a tall, crystalline column that rose from the floor to the domed ceiling, approximately 30 feet high. Bands of light normally pulsed along its surface in complex patterns that represented its thought processes. Right now, those lights were flickering erratically, sometimes flashing bright red before going completely dark for several seconds. Around the base of the column, a team of technicians from various species worked frantically with tools and devices Marcus didn't recognize. They had panels open, exposing circuits that seemed to bend space around themselves and components that existed in what appeared to be multiple dimensions simultaneously. A crystalline engineer, her blue form crackling with stress patterns, was arguing with a Zephyrian tech specialist whose mandibles clicked rapidly as he spoke. The quantum matrices are completely destabilized, the crystalline being said through her translator. We need to reinitialize the core consciousness. Impossible, chittered the Zephyrian. The consciousness matrices are hardwired into the dimensional substrate. If we reset the core, we lose 1,000 years of accumulated legal precedence. Marcus pushed his cart closer, pretending to clean while listening to the technical discussion. From what he could gather, the AI judge wasn't just malfunctioning randomly. Something had caused a cascade failure in its decision-making protocols. The machine was stuck in an infinite loop, trying to process the Zephyrian crystalline dispute but unable to reach a conclusion. Every few minutes, the AI judge would flicker to life and begin to speak in its resonant, multi-tonal voice that somehow communicated in every language simultaneously, analyzing territorial claim parameters, cross-referencing with galactic maritime law, calculating resource distribution algorithms. Then the lights would flash red and everything would go dark again. How long has it been like this? Marcus asked one of the human diplomatic observers who was standing nearby looking worried. About 6 hours. The diplomat replied, without really looking at him. Started right after they input the case details for the Zephyrian crystalline dispute. The AI judge tried to process the information and just broke. Marcus nodded and continued cleaning, but his mind was working on the problem. In his 3 years at the station, he had fixed countless broken machines. Alien technology was impressive, but machines were machines. They all followed certain basic principles. Even if those principles were wrapped in quantum mechanics and dimensional engineering that he didn't fully understand. The real problem, Marcus realized as he watched the frantic technicians, was that everyone was trying to fix the AI judge like it was a normal computer. They were focusing on the quantum matrices and consciousness substrates and dimensional whatevers. But what if the problem was simpler than that? Marcus had seen this kind of behavior before. Last year, the station's main atmospheric processor had gotten stuck in a similar loop. The alien engineers had spent 3 days trying to recalibrate its environmental algorithms before Marcus suggested they check if something was physically blocking one of the intake sensors. Sure enough, a small piece of debris had gotten lodged in a ventilation port, causing the entire system to receive contradictory data and freeze up. Looking at the AI judge now, Marcus wondered if something similar might be happening. The machine was trying to process a legal decision, but what if it was receiving conflicting information that prevented it from reaching a conclusion? He circled around the chamber, ostensibly cleaning but actually observing the situation from different angles. The Zephyrian and crystalline representatives were standing on opposite sides of the room, as far apart as possible. Their body language and the colors of their bioluminescent displays clearly showed they were still furious with each other. That's when Marcus noticed something interesting. Every time the AI judge tried to restart its analysis, it would turn slightly to scan both groups of representatives. And every time it did, the Zephyrians would move closer together in a defensive formation, while the crystalline beings would brighten their internal lights in what Marcus had learned was an aggressive display. The AI judge was trying to read the emotional states and intentions of both parties as part of its decision-making process, but instead of getting stable input data, it was receiving constantly changing signals of anger, fear, and hostility. The machine was stuck because the situation kept changing every time it tried to analyze it. Marcus smiled to himself. This wasn't a quantum mechanical problem or a consciousness substrate issue. This was a people problem, and while he might not know anything about advanced alien technology, Marcus had spent 3 years learning how to read alien emotions and behavior patterns. He looked around the room at all the brilliant engineers and diplomats who were focused on the technical aspects of the crisis. Not one of them was paying attention to the simple fact that the AI judge couldn't make a decision about beings who wouldn't stop changing their emotional states long enough for it to get a stable reading. Marcus sat down his mop and walked toward the center of the chamber. Several alien technicians looked up in surprise as the human janitor approached the most sophisticated machine in the galaxy. "Excuse me," Marcus said politely, his voice somehow carrying clearly through the chaos. "I think I might know what's wrong." The entire courtroom fell silent as hundreds of alien eyes turned to stare at Marcus. The sudden quiet was so complete that the only sounds were the occasional electronic beeps from the malfunctioning AI judge and the soft hum of the station's life support systems. A tall Felinian official, her fur standing slightly on end, was the first to speak. "The maintenance human thinks it can repair the judge?" Her translated voice carried clear skepticism and what might have been amusement. "With respect," said Dr. Vexai, the lead Zephyrian engineer, his mandibles clicking dismissively, "this machine represents the combined technological achievement of 12 advanced civilizations. It contains quantum processing cores that operate in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Perhaps the human should return to its cleaning duties." Marcus felt his cheeks redden slightly, but he had dealt with condescending attitudes before. 3 years of being treated as the primitive human had taught him patience. "I'm not saying I can fix the computer," he said calmly. "I'm saying I might know why it can't think straight." He gestured toward the AI judge, which chose that moment to flicker back to life. "Analyzing territorial claim parameters, detecting elevated stress hormones in primary parties, recalibrating emotional baseline or error, conflicting bio-emotional data." Analysis suspended. The lights went red and died again. "See?" Marcus said. "It's not broken. It's confused." A ripple of chittering and harmonic tones swept through the gathered aliens as they translated Marcus's words to each other. The crystalline engineer who had been arguing with the Zephyrian earlier pulsed a pattern of orange and blue lights. "Explain this confusion theory, human." Marcus took a deep breath and walked closer to the AI judge. Several security drones immediately moved to intercept him, but the chief diplomat, an ancient being called a sage whose species Marcus had never learned to identify, raised one of its multiple appendages to stop them. "The AI judge isn't just a computer," Marcus began, addressing the room. "According to everything I've heard, it's designed to make decisions based on logic, legal precedent, and an understanding of the emotional and cultural context of all parties involved, right?" Dr. Vexai's mandibles twitched. "That is a crude but essentially accurate description. Okay, so think about what's happening here. Every time the judge tries to analyze this case, it looks at both sides to get a reading on their emotional states and intentions. But every time it does that, both sides get more agitated because they think it's taking too long or favoring the other side." Marcus pointed to the Zephyrian delegation, whose members were indeed clustering closer together, their chittering growing more agitated. "The Zephyrians see the judge looking at them and think it's finding them guilty, so they get more defensive. Their stress levels spike." Then he pointed to the crystalline beings whose internal lights had shifted to a deeper red pattern. "The crystallines see the same thing and think the judge is biased against them, so their bioluminescence shows more aggression. Their emotional output changes, but that would mean," the sage began, its voice trailing off as understanding dawned. "The judge tries to factor in these new emotional readings, but by the time it does, everyone's mood has changed again because they're getting more worried about the delay. It's like trying to measure something that keeps moving every time you look at it. The courtroom buzzed with conversation as various species discussed this possibility in their native languages. Marcus could see some of them beginning to nod or display whatever body language indicated agreement in their culture. The crystalline engineer pulsed a rapid pattern of white lights. The bio-emotional feedback loop hypothesis has theoretical merit, she said. But how does the human propose to test this theory? Marcus smiled. Easy. We get everyone to calm down and stop moving around so much. Give the judge stable emotional data to work with instead of a constantly changing mess. Impossible, Dr. Vexhai clicked. The territorial dispute involves resources worth 17 trillion galactic credits. Neither side will simply calm down while their future is being decided. Maybe they will if they understand that getting emotional is the thing that's preventing the decision from being made. Marcus replied. Look, you all are way smarter than me about the technical stuff. But I've been cleaning these halls for 3 years and I've learned a few things about how different species act when they're stressed. He gestured around the room. Right now, everyone is focused on the AI judge like it's some kind of mysterious magical device. But it's not magic. It's just a very sophisticated machine that's trying to do its job. And part of that job is reading the room. Literally. Marcus walked over to his cleaning cart and pulled out a small device he used to test air quality in different sections of the station. This little gadget measures atmospheric conditions. If I tried to use it in a room where someone was constantly opening and closing windows, turning heaters on and off, and spraying different chemicals in the air, it would never give me a stable reading. The AI judge is having the same problem, just with emotions instead of air quality. The ancient sage moved closer, its many sensory organs focusing on Marcus with what seemed like genuine interest. The human suggests that our emotional states are contaminating the judge's analytical processes. Exactly, Marcus said. And the solution isn't to rebuild the judge or reset its quantum whatever. The solution is to give it clean data to work with. The Felinian official's ears twitched forward. How do you propose we accomplish this emotional stability, while the fate of 2 civilizations hangs in the balance? Marcus grinned. That's the easy part. We just need everyone to sit down, take a deep breath, and let the judge do its job without staring at it like it's about to explode. Maybe grab some coffee or whatever you all drink. Make it boring instead of terrifying. He paused and looked around the room at the collection of some of the galaxy's most advanced beings. Trust me, I've seen a lot of broken machines get fixed just by giving them space to work properly. Sometimes the most sophisticated technology in the universe still needs the most basic solution. The suggestion that some of the galaxy's most powerful beings should simply sit down and have coffee, while their civilizations teetered on the brink of war, was met with a mixture of incredulous chittering, harmonic protests, and bioluminescent displays that Marcus had learned meant absolutely not. The human expects us to treat this crisis like a casual social gathering? Dr. Vexhai's mandibles clacked rapidly. Billions of lives hang in the balance, which is exactly why we should try something different, Marcus replied calmly. What you've been doing for the past 6 hours isn't working. The judge is stuck in a loop, tensions are getting higher, and according to what I heard earlier, both your fleets are getting ready to start shooting at each other. The crystalline engineer's patterns shifted to deep purple, which Marcus had observed usually meant deep thought. The human's hypothesis does have logical merit, she said slowly. We have been operating under the assumption that the judge's malfunction was technical rather than environmental. Environmental? The sage's multiple voice boxes created a harmony of curiosity. Yes, the crystalline continued, her lights brightening as she worked through the problem. We have been treating the courtroom as a sterile space where the judge operates independently. But the judge was specifically designed to read and interpret the emotional and psychological states of the beings whose disputes it resolves. If those states are in constant flux due to anxiety about the process itself, then the judge cannot establish a stable baseline for analysis, finished a new voice. Everyone turned to see a being Marcus had never encountered before. It appeared to be made entirely of shifting geometric patterns that existed in what seemed like 4 dimensions simultaneously. The universal translator struggled for a moment before settling on a gender-neutral voice that sounded like crystalline chimes. Honored architect, the sage said, its posture shifting to what Marcus recognized as deep respect. We did not know you had arrived. The architects designed the original consciousness matrix for the AI judge. The crystalline engineer explained to Marcus in an aside, "Their species exists partially outside normal spacetime." The architect's geometric form shifted into new configurations as it spoke. "The human's assessment is correct. The judge was programmed to incorporate bio-emotional data as a critical component of its decision-making process. This was deemed necessary because pure logical analysis often failed to account for the cultural and psychological factors that drive interspecies conflicts." Dr. Vexhigh's chittering took on a defensive tone. "Are you suggesting that our emotional responses are preventing justice from being served?" "I am stating that your emotional responses are preventing the judge from processing the case," the architect replied. "The machine is not malfunctioning. It is performing exactly as designed. However, the environmental conditions are unsuitable for stable operation." Marcus felt a surge of vindication, but he kept his expression neutral. He had learned that aliens didn't always appreciate being proven wrong, especially by humans. "So what do we do about it?" he asked. The architect's pattern shifted again. The simplest solution would be to isolate the judge from bio-emotional interference during the decision-making process. However, this would require all organic beings to withdraw from the chamber. "Unacceptable," said the Felinian representative immediately. "Both sides must be present, to ensure the judge has access to all relevant information, and to ensure that neither side attempts to influence the process," added a Zephyrian diplomat. Marcus looked around the room at the impasse that was developing. Everyone understood the problem now, but the solution seemed impossible. Neither side trusted the other enough to leave them alone with the judge, but their presence was preventing the judge from functioning. "What if we compromised?" Marcus suggested. "What if everyone stays but we create conditions that help stabilize the emotional environment?" "How?" asked the sage. Marcus thought for a moment, drawing on his 3 years of observing alien behavior in stressful situations. "Well, first, everyone needs to stop staring at the judge like it's about to announce the end of the world. When people focus intensely on something they're worried about, their stress levels spike." He gestured toward the viewing galleries that surrounded the central chamber. "What if everyone sits down in the gallery seats instead of standing around the judge? Physical distance should reduce the intensity of the bio-emotional readings." The crystalline engineer's lights flickered in a pattern Marcus had learned indicated calculation. Distance would indeed reduce signal strength. The judge would still receive emotional data, but it would be more diffuse and stable. "Second," Marcus continued, "everyone needs something else to think about besides the decision. When you're sitting in a waiting room at a doctor's office, do you stare at the examination room door the whole time? Or do you read a magazine? The human suggests distraction therapy?" The architect's pattern shifted to what might have been amusement. "Fascinating. I suggest normal behavior," Marcus corrected. "Instead of treating this like a life or death crisis, treat it like what it actually is. A legal proceeding where you're waiting for a judge to make a decision. Talk about other things. Check your messages. Do whatever you normally do when you're waiting." The sage's sensory organs focused on Marcus with what felt like intense scrutiny. "The human proposes that we should ignore the most important legal decision in galactic history?" "No," Marcus said firmly. "I'm proposing that you should let the judge make the most important legal decision in galactic history without accidentally sabotaging it with your anxiety." He looked around the room at the various species, each dealing with stress in their own unique ways. "Look, I get it. This is huge. But the judge was built by all of your civilizations specifically because it could make better decisions than any of you could make individually. So let it do that. Trust the machine you built." Marcus walked back toward his cleaning cart, then paused and turned around. "Besides, if the judge can't handle making one decision without breaking down, maybe the problem isn't the emotional environment. Maybe the problem is that you built a judge that isn't actually ready to judge anything important." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus immediately wondered if he had gone too far. But then the architect's geometric patterns shifted into what looked like rapid oscillations. "The human has presented a logical paradox," the architect said. "Either the judge is capable of handling this decision, in which case we should trust it to function properly, or it is not capable, in which case the decision should not be entrusted to it, regardless of environmental conditions." Dr. Vexhigh's mandibles stopped clicking entirely. The crystalline engineer's lights dimmed to a steady blue. Around the room, various alien representatives began to settle into more relaxed postures. "Very well," said the sage finally. "We will attempt the human solution." The transformation of the courtroom over the next hour was remarkable. Under the sage's direction, all the representatives moved to the gallery seats that surrounded the central chamber. The Zephyrians chose one section while the crystalline beings settled in an area on the opposite side, but the physical distance seemed to ease some of the tension between them. Marcus continued his cleaning duties, moving quietly around the chamber while the various species attempted to follow his advice about acting normally. It was fascinating to watch. The Felinians groomed themselves with their rough tongues, their purring creating a low harmonic background. The aquatic depths checked and rechecked their breathing apparatus, occasionally releasing small bubbles that caught the light. The energy beings contained within their crystal matrices flickered in patterns that seemed more random and relaxed than before. Most surprisingly, aliens began talking to each other across species lines. Not about the case, but about ordinary things. Marcus overheard a Zephyrian discussing recent weather patterns on their homeworld with a Felinian, who was apparently interested in atmospheric sciences. Two crystalline beings were showing holographic images of their offspring to a group of depths, who responded with what their translators rendered as adorable chittering. The AI judge, meanwhile, had begun to show signs of improvement. The frantic red flashing had stopped, and the bands of light along its crystalline surface were starting to pulse in more regular patterns. Occasionally it would speak, but instead of the frustrated error messages from before, it was making steady progress through its analysis. Cross-referencing Zephyrian territorial claim with Galactic Maritime Code Section 4.7, analyzing crystalline mining rights under the Outer Rim Development Treaty, calculating resource allocation algorithms based on population density and industrial capacity. Each announcement was met with brief glances from the representatives. But following Marcus's advice, they weren't staring intently at the judge. Instead, they would look up, register the progress, and return to their conversations. Marcus was cleaning near the Zephyrian section when he overheard something that made him pause. Two of their diplomats were discussing agricultural techniques with what appeared to be a visiting scientist from another species. "Entirely. Your homeworld soil composition is similar to our moon colonies," the scientist was saying. "We developed a nitrogen-fixing bacteria that might work well in your northern continents." "Interesting," replied one of the Zephyrians. "Our agriculture specialists have been struggling with productivity in that region for decades." It struck Marcus that this was exactly the kind of peaceful, cooperative conversation that the AI judge was designed to encourage between species. The machine wasn't just settling disputes. It was creating an environment where different civilizations could find common ground. A soft chime drew his attention back to the judge, which was now glowing with steady bands of blue and green light. Analysis Phase 1 complete. Beginning cultural context evaluation. Estimated completion 47 minutes. 47 minutes. Marcus smiled to himself as he realized that the judge was actually ahead of schedule now. When it had been stuck in the error loop, the technicians had estimated it would take days to resolve the case. Assuming they could fix the malfunction at all, Dr. Vexhigh approached Marcus as he was emptying a waste receptacle near the technical station. "Human," he said, his mandibles moving in what Marcus had learned was a gesture of respect among Zephyrians. "I owe you an apology. Your solution was elegant." "Just common sense," Marcus replied. "Sometimes the biggest problems have the simplest solutions." Perhaps, but it required someone with a different perspective to see it. We were so focused on the technical complexity of the judge that we forgot it was designed to work with living beings, not in spite of them. The crystalline engineer drifted over, her internal lights pulsing in warm yellows and greens. "The human's approach has resulted in the most stable bio-emotional readings we have recorded in this chamber. The judge's efficiency has improved by 43%. Marcus nodded politely, but his attention was drawn to something else entirely. As he looked around the room, he realized that the atmosphere had completely changed. What had started as a desperate attempt to prevent galactic war had become something much more positive. The various species weren't just tolerating each other's presence anymore. They were actually enjoying it. The Felinians were sharing hunting stories with the depths, who responded with tales of deep ocean exploration. A group of energy beings were demonstrating some kind of light sculpture art form for fascinated organic observers. Even the Zephyrians and crystalline beings, who had been ready to go to war just hours before, were stealing curious glances at each other across the chamber. They weren't talking directly yet, but Marcus could see the hostility fading from their body language. "Remarkable," said the architect, materializing next to Marcus in a configuration of geometric shapes that somehow suggested contemplation.
The emotional baseline has not merely stabilized.
It has shifted toward cooperation and curiosity. "People like talking to each other," Marcus said simply. "They just need an excuse to do it." The human implies that interspecies cooperation is a natural state rather than an artificial goal. Marcus considered this as he watched a young Zephyrian show holographic images of their homeworld's crystal forests to a fascinated group of mixed-species observers. "I think most people want to get along. They just get scared and defensive when they think someone is trying to take something from them or hurt them. But if you give them a chance to see each other as individuals instead of threats," he gestured around the room, "look at them. A few hours ago, half these species were ready to choose sides in a war. Now they're sharing baby pictures and farming tips." The AI judge chimed again. "Cultural context evaluation complete. Beginning final synthesis and recommendation formulation. Estimated completion, 18 minutes. This time the announcement was met with satisfied murmurs rather than anxious tension. The representatives were confident now that the judge was working properly, and many seemed almost disappointed that the peaceful interlude was coming to an end. Marcus realized that in trying to fix the AI judge, he had accidentally created something much more valuable than a functioning legal decision. He had created a space where dozens of different civilizations could discover that they actually liked each other. The question was, what would happen when the decision was announced? As the final minutes ticked down, Marcus noticed a shift in the room's energy. Conversations were becoming more subdued, and representatives were glancing more frequently. At the AI judge, the peaceful atmosphere he had helped create was being slowly replaced by nervous anticipation. The judge itself was magnificent to watch in its final phase. Bands of light raced along its crystalline surface in complex patterns, processing thousands of years of legal precedent and cultural data. Occasionally, holographic displays would appear around its base, showing star charts, resource allocation models, and what appeared to be sociological impact projections. Marcus was putting away his cleaning supplies when he heard hushed arguing from the Zephyrian section. Two of their representatives were having what seemed to be a heated discussion, though they were clearly trying to keep their voices down. "The territorial concessions are unacceptable," one was chittering quietly. "We need those quantum crystal deposits for our energy infrastructure." "But look around," the other replied, gesturing subtly toward the rest of the chamber. "These beings could be valuable allies. Perhaps there are other solutions we have not considered." Similar conversations seemed to be happening throughout the gallery. Marcus caught fragments of discussion from the crystalline section about long-term diplomatic benefits and peaceful resource sharing agreements. Even species that weren't directly involved in the dispute were talking quietly about how the decision might affect their own relationships with the two primary parties. The AI judge chimed one final time. "Analysis complete. Preparing to announce decision and recommendations." The chamber fell completely silent except for the soft hum of life support systems and the gentle bubbling from the depth's breathing apparatus. Every eye, sensor, and bioluminescent organ in the room focused on the towering crystalline column. After comprehensive analysis of all legal, cultural, and economic factors, the judge announced in its multi-tonal voice, "This court finds that the disputed Kepler 4042 system contains sufficient quantum crystal deposits to meet the reasonable needs of both the Zephyrian Empire and the crystalline collective." Marcus saw representatives from both sides tense up, preparing for what they assumed would be a decision to split the territory between them. However, the judge continued, "The court also finds that independent exploitation of these resources by either party would be economically inefficient and potentially destabilizing to galactic commodity markets." Now everyone looked confused. Marcus found himself leaning forward, curious about where this was going. "Therefore, the court orders the establishment of a joint development cooperative between the Zephyrian Empire and Crystalline Collective. with shared governance, equal profit distribution, and integrated resource management. Furthermore, the court recommends that this cooperative be expanded to include scientific exchange programs and cultural ambassadorships between both civilizations. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus looked back and forth between the two groups, trying to read their reactions. The Zephyrian's mandibles were clicking in rapid patterns that he couldn't interpret. The crystalline being's internal lights were flickering through colors he had never seen before. Then, surprisingly, one of the younger crystalline representatives began to pulse in what Marcus recognized as laughter. "A joint cooperative," she said, her lights brightening to warm gold. "We spend centuries preparing for war, and the judge suggests we become business partners." A Zephyrian diplomat whose chitin was marked with what appeared to be age spots clicked his mandibles in what might have been amusement. "The irony is considerable. Our military intelligence suggests that their mining techniques would complement our crystal processing capabilities quite efficiently. You have been analyzing our industrial methods?" asked a crystalline engineer, but her tone was curious rather than offended. "Standard intelligence gathering," the Zephyrian replied. "Though I confess, your bioluminescent quality control systems are quite impressive. Your thermal regulation technology could solve our main production bottlenecks," another crystalline being added thoughtfully. Marcus watched in amazement as the two sides began actually talking to each other for the first time. Not through intermediaries or formal diplomatic channels, but direct conversation between individuals who were discovering they had more in common than they had differences. The sage moved to the center of the chamber, its ancient voice carrying clearly through the space. "The AI judge has spoken. Do both parties accept this decision?" There was a long pause as the Zephyrian and crystalline representatives looked at each other across the chamber. Marcus could see them weighing the implications, not just of the legal decision, but of the unexpected possibility of cooperation that had emerged. "The Crystalline Collective accepts the court's decision," announced their lead diplomat, her lights pulsing in formal patterns, "and we welcome the opportunity to work with our Zephyrian colleagues." "The Zephyrian Empire also accepts," replied Dr. Vexhai, his mandibles moving in what Marcus now recognized as a gesture of respect. "We look forward to this partnership." Suddenly, the chamber erupted in harmonious sounds as representatives from dozens of species expressed approval and relief. The Felinians purred, the depths released celebratory streams of bubbles, and the energy beings created spectacular light displays within their containment matrices. But Marcus noticed something even more remarkable happening. Throughout the gallery, representatives from other species were approaching each other with new conversation topics. The successful resolution of the Zephyrian crystalline dispute seemed to have created an atmosphere where other potential conflicts could be discussed before they escalated to crisis levels. The architect materialized beside Marcus again, its geometric patterns more stable and somehow more elegant than before. "The human's intervention has produced unexpected secondary effects," it observed. "How so?" Marcus asked. "The AI judge was designed to resolve disputes through legal analysis, but the environmental conditions created by the human's suggestions have demonstrated that many conflicts can be prevented entirely through improved interspecies communication." Marcus looked around the chamber at the dozens of conversations happening between species that rarely interacted outside of formal diplomatic settings. "So what happens now?" "Now," said the sage, approaching them with what seemed like genuine warmth, "we must consider how to replicate these conditions in other venues. The human has inadvertently created a diplomatic protocol that may be more valuable than any legal precedent." Marcus felt a flush of pride, but also uncertainty. "I just suggested that everyone calm down and act normal." "Yes," the architect said, its patterns shifting into what might have been amusement. "Simple solutions to complex problems. Perhaps there is wisdom in the human approach that we have overlooked." As Marcus gathered his cleaning supplies and prepared to leave the chamber, he realized that something fundamental had changed. Not just in how the AI judge functioned, but in how dozens of galactic civilizations saw each other. He had come to work that morning as just a janitor cleaning up after beings far more advanced than himself. He was leaving as the person who had accidentally taught the galaxy a new way to solve problems. But the biggest surprise was still to come. 3 days later, Marcus was cleaning the observation deck when the sage found him. The ancient being moved with the slow dignity that came from having witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, but there was something different about its posture today. Something that seemed almost excited. Human Marcus, the sage said, its multiple voice boxes creating a harmony that somehow conveyed warmth. The Galactic Council would like to speak with you. Marcus paused in his work, looking up at the being whose species had been exploring space when humans were still discovering fire. Is there a problem? I mean, did I break some kind of protocol by interfering with the AI judge? On the contrary, the sage replied. Your intervention has produced results that extend far beyond the resolution of a single territorial dispute. As they made their way through the station's corridors, the sage explained what had happened in the 3 days since the hearing. The joint Zephyrian Crystalline Cooperative had been formalized with unprecedented speed, and both civilizations had requested that future diplomatic sessions be conducted using what they were calling the Human Protocol. But that is only the beginning, the sage continued as they entered a transport pod heading toward the council chambers. 7 other interspecies disputes have been resolved in the past 72 hours, all using variations of your approach. The Felinian aquatic fishing rights conflict, the energy being territorial boundaries case, even the ancient trade route dispute between the Outer Rim colonies. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. All I did was suggest that everyone stop staring at the judge and have normal conversations. Yes, simple solutions to complex problems. It appears to be a distinctly human approach to conflict resolution. The council chambers were unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Representatives from hundreds of species filled a massive spherical space that seemed to extend in all directions simultaneously. Some beings floated in zero-gravity zones while others stood on platforms that adjusted to their specific environmental needs. At the center of the sphere, a holographic display showed real-time communication networks connecting thousands of worlds across the galaxy. As Marcus entered, a wave of attention rippled through the assembled representatives. He could hear the whir of universal translators working overtime, as his presence was noted and discussed in dozens of languages. The council moderator, a being whose species Marcus couldn't identify, spoke in a voice that somehow reached every corner of the sphere simultaneously. Human Marcus of Earth, the Galactic Council recognizes your contribution to interspecies relations and requests your input on a proposal of significant importance. A holographic display materialized in front of Marcus, showing what appeared to be architectural plans for a massive space station. But this wasn't like the Justice Station where he worked. This new design incorporated features he had never seen before: communal gathering spaces, recreational areas, cultural exchange centers, and what looked like residential quarters for mixed-species communities. The council proposes the construction of a new type of diplomatic facility, the moderator explained. Rather than bringing representatives together only during crises, this station would serve as a permanent venue for ongoing interspecies cooperation and cultural exchange. Marcus studied the plans, recognizing elements that reminded him of university campuses and community centers from Earth. It's designed for people to actually live and work together, not just meet for formal negotiations. Precisely, said Dr. Vexhai, who apparently had been appointed to the planning committee. Your approach demonstrated that many conflicts arise from lack of understanding rather than incompatible interests. This facility would address that root cause. The crystalline engineer who had worked on the AI judge added her thoughts through flickering bioluminescent patterns. We have discovered that when species interact in relaxed, informal settings, they naturally develop the relationships that make formal cooperation more effective. But why are you asking me? Marcus said. I'm just a janitor. I don't know anything about designing space stations or diplomatic protocols. The ancient sage moved closer, its sensory organs focusing on Marcus with what felt like deep respect. You know something that none of our advanced civilizations had discovered in millennia, of formal diplomacy. You understand that the most sophisticated technology and most elegant legal frameworks are useless if the beings using them cannot relate to each other as individuals. The architect materialized. In the center of the sphere, its geometric patterns shifting into configurations that suggested excitement. The human's approach has proven more effective than our traditional methods. The council wishes to know, would you be willing to help design protocols for this new facility? Marcus looked around at the hundreds of representatives from civilizations that spanned the galaxy, species that had developed technologies beyond human comprehension, explored dimensions that humans couldn't even imagine, and built societies that had lasted for millions of years, and they were asking him for advice. "I don't have any special training in diplomacy or interspecies relations," he said honestly. "No," agreed the moderator. "But you have something we apparently lacked. The ability to see complex problems as human problems. Your species may be younger and less technologically advanced than ours, but you have developed an intuitive understanding of social dynamics that we had overlooked in our pursuit of formal solutions." A new voice spoke from the assembled representatives. Marcus turned to see a being he didn't recognize, tall and ethereal with skin that seemed to contain swirling galaxies. The human approach has already prevented 3 potential conflicts from escalating to the point where formal intervention was necessary. The ripple effects of improved interspecies understanding may be immeasurable. Marcus thought about his 3 years working on the Justice Station, observing the various alien species and learning to read their emotions and behaviors. He had never considered that this experience might be valuable beyond helping him do his job more effectively. "If I agree to help," he said slowly, "I want to make one thing clear. I'm not some kind of expert on alien psychology or galactic politics. I'm just someone who's learned to pay attention to how people act when they're stressed, scared, or trying to get along with others. That may be exactly the expertise we need," the sage replied. Marcus smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought him from cleaning floors to addressing the Galactic Council. "In that case, I have a few suggestions. But first, can someone explain why none of you ever thought to put a coffee shop in a diplomatic facility?" The sphere filled with harmonious sounds that Marcus was beginning to recognize as interspecies laughter. As he began to outline his ideas for creating spaces where beings could interact naturally, rather than formally, he realized that his greatest contribution to galactic civilization wasn't going to be advanced technology or brilliant scientific discoveries. It was going to be the simple human understanding that most problems get easier to solve when people stop treating each other as problems and start treating each other as people. Even when those people happen to come from different planets, breathe different atmospheres, and communicate through bioluminescent patterns or harmonic frequencies, the basic principle remained the same. Everyone just wanted to be understood, respected, and given a chance to contribute something meaningful to the galaxy they all shared. And sometimes, Marcus reflected as he began what would become his new career as the galaxy's first human diplomatic consultant, the most advanced civilizations in the universe needed a janitor to remind them of that simple truth.